Okay, the next major topic that we covered that we need to review is the scientific method. A scientist may ask a question like, do plants like music? If it's a question, it's a problem. It is not a hypothesis. This is something that a scientist wants to solve. It's the problem. Hypothesis is different. It's a prediction. Now, a scientist is going to end up with two groups of plants. If they were studying mice, they would have two groups of mice. But in this case, we're looking at the effect of music on plants. So we have two groups of plants. One group is going to get music and the other is not. And then we're going to measure, let's say, their height or something else that we were interested in. Okay. And so we now have an experiment. We have two groups. Only one thing is different. We're measuring their height. And by everything, only one thing is different, everything else has to be the same. For example, it must be the same species of plant, the same amount of water, the same light, the same soil. Now, that would be a controlled experiment, and scientists use controlled experiments all the time. The Regents likes to use specific terms to describe each part of the experiment. So we have whatever group or samples or trials that we did without the music, it's the control group. On the other hand, the one with the music is the experimental group. So anytime that you have two groups, whatever's different, the thing without it is the control group. Sometimes that's a little difficult to tell. Say you have males and females. Well, there's just really no control or experimental group. You just have two different groups that you're comparing. But if you have something without and something with, the group of plants without music is the control group. The group of plants with the music is the experimental group. Do not say the experimental group is music, because that's not the case. That's something else. The music is a different part. The plants without music, control group. The plants with music, experimental group. In fact, the music is the thing that's different between the two. So music is the independent variable. It's the thing that's different between the two groups. And we think the height may depend on whether they get music or not. So the height is the dependent variable. These things are constants. Frequently, they are mislabeled controls. Do not call these controls. This is the control group. This is the experimental group. The constants stay the same. The independent variable is the thing you made different between them to begin with, and the dependent variable is the thing you're going to measure that you think will depend on whether they got music or not. Think it will. Now, the Regents wants you to be able to frame this entire experiment in a hypothesis. Remember that a hypothesis is a prediction of an outcome. It is not a question. So the best thing to do for a hypothesis is frame it as an if-then statement. If plants are given music, then they will grow taller. Notice if you're confused about the independent and dependent variable, the music is the independent variable, independent if. The dependent variable is in the other part of the hypothesis, height, then they will grow taller. So if you can write a good prediction, a good if-then statement, the independent variable is the thing that's mentioned in the if part. The dependent variable is in the then part. So we're going to take a quick look at the different parts. So a statement predicting a measurable outcome to an experiment. What was the statement? Called. That was our if plants are given music, then they will grow taller. That statement is called what? The samples that are the basis for comparison, that is the group without the music, was called the what? The group that does have the music, the group that does have the music is the other one. So what did we call the group with the music? The thing that we made different, right? There was music in one and no music in the other. What is that called? And what you think will be dependent upon that you predict will be different. Here, the height. And then there's a bunch of stuff you have to keep the same. Let's see how you did with those. The hypothesis is the statement. You have the control group. Those are the plants without music. You have the experimental group. Those are the plants with music. Don't just say music. It's plants with music. The independent variable is the thing that's different. The dependent variable is the thing you are going to measure during the experiment that you think will depend upon it. In this case, the height. And the constants are the things you have to keep the same. A lot of questions on the Regents will ask for what was done wrong. They'll say, Mary wants to know if exercise increases pulse. And so Mary had a bunch of her classmates exercise and then took their pulse. What did she do wrong? Well, if she only had them exercise and take their pulse, she has no idea if the pulse went up with exercise because she didn't have a control. Frequently, the experiments that they show on those tests have no control. Or maybe Mary has one group of boys not exercising and one group of girls exercising and then checks their pulse. So that's too many independent variables. Both exercise is a variable and their sex is a variable. So that's no good. And in our experiment, we only had one plant in each group. We had one without music and one with. That's no good. What if that plant particularly had a disease? Then it wouldn't grow as tall. So sample sizes are really important. And you can always say, always, every time they put an experiment, how can it be improved? Add more samples. If there's 1,000 plants in the control group and 1,000 in the experimental group, adding 10 more to each improves the experiment. Okay?